We Americans are known for freedom, bravery, and asking if the Eiffel Tower has a drive-through. Welcome to the ultimate compilation of the 49 most embarrassing, hilarious, and downright unbelievable things my fellow Americans have done while on vacation. From demanding ice in British pubs to trying to pet wild lions. These stories will make you laugh until it hurts. If you don't want to end up on this list, smash that subscribe button and comment your craziest travel story below. Let's go. 1. Rome in the middle of summer is famously sweltering, especially inside the massive stone amphitheater known as the Colosseum. But for one middle-aged American dad named Bob, the historic heat was simply unacceptable service. He wiped sweat from his brow. He marched right up to a confused Italian tour guide to lodge a formal complaint. Bob loudly asked where the thermostat was because it was way too hot in this old ruin. He insisted they turn on the air conditioning immediately. The guide stared in total silence. While the rest of the tour group pretended they didn't speak English, Bob just kept fanning himself, waiting for cool air that would never come. 2. London is a bustling metropolis where millions of people live and work in serious professions like banking and law. However, a cheerful American tourist named Jessica apparently thought the entire city was just a giant version of Epcot. After getting lost near Oxford Circus, she stopped a man in a sharp-tailored suit to ask for directions. He politely pointed the way and turned to leave. But Jessica wasn't done yet. She reached into her purse and insisted on pressing a 2-pound coin into his hand as a tip. The wealthy banker looked at the coin in horror, while Jessica walked away beaming, thinking she had just tipped a very helpful theme park employee. 3. Picture a sunny cafe in Sydney, Australia, where a loud tourist named Steve sat down for brunch. He opened the menu and stared at words like capsicum and rocket. Instead of politely asking the waiter what they meant, Steve threw the menu on the table in disgust. He loudly demanded a menu written in American, not British, because he didn't speak foreign languages. The waiter just blinked slowly, trying to process the sheer audacity of the request. The entire cafe went silent while Steve waited for his translated menu. He truly believed Australian English was a totally different language that needed translation just for him to order a burger. 4. A mom named Linda decided to pack for her week in Europe like she was moving to Mars forever. She brought 3 massive suitcases filled with heels she would never wear. They arrived at a charming boutique hotel in Amsterdam, which was famous for being authentic. Authentic meant it was built in the 1600s and had absolutely no elevator. Linda looked up at the 4 flights of narrow spiral stairs in pure horror. She spent the next hour dragging 50 pounds of luggage up the steps, while the concierge watched. He politely offered to help, but Linda insisted she had it under control while gasping for air on the first landing. 5. Paris is the culinary capital of the world, known for croissants and coq au vin. But Frank was a man of simple tastes who did not trust sauces he could not pronounce. He walked past 5 Michelin-star restaurants with his hungry family trailing behind him. Frank was on a desperate mission to find a McDonald's because French food was just too weird for his stomach. He finally found the Golden Arches and breathed a sigh of relief. He ordered a Royale with cheese, thinking he was cultured. The French patrons eating their gourmet burgers looked at Frank with a mix of pity and confusion as he dipped his fries in ketchup. 6. A friendly college student named Tyler was backpacking through London, making friends at a local pub. He started chatting with a bartender who had a very thick, posh British accent. Tyler listened typically and decided to offer what he thought was a huge compliment. He looked the bartender in the eye and said, "Wow, you speak English really well." Then he asked what part of America the British man was originally from. The bartender stopped pouring a pint and stared at Tyler in silence. He calmly explained that the language is literally named after his country. Tyler just laughed and said the accent was totally convincing anyway. 7. In a small village in Italy, a tourist named Karen wanted a scoop of pistachio gelato. She waited in line and ordered with a lot of hand gestures. When it was time to pay, she slapped a crisp $20 bill on the counter. The cashier shook his head and politely said, "Euros only, please." Karen was personally offended that her American money was not good enough for ice cream. She started arguing that money is money and he should just take the exchange rate. The line behind her grew longer and angrier. She eventually stormed off, shouting that she would take her business to a place that respected real currency. 8. You can spot Mike from a mile away on the fashionable streets of Milan. While the Italians around him wore tailored suits and designer leather shoes, Mike had a different vibe. He was proudly wearing an oversized college hoodie with cargo shorts and bright white socks pulled up high. To top off the look, he wore a baseball cap backward inside a cathedral. Locals crossed the street just to avoid looking at his fashion choices. Mike turned to his wife and asked why everyone was staring at him. He genuinely thought they were admiring his comfortable sneakers and his school spirit. 9. Japanese trains are famous for being incredibly quiet and respectful places where people whisper. But Brenda did not get that memo when she boarded the bullet train to Tokyo. She immediately started a loud phone call with her friend back home, describing her lunch. The entire car was dead silent except for Brenda shouting about sushi textures. She looked around at the passengers who were quietly reading or sleeping. Brenda hung up and loudly complained to her husband that nobody here smiles or talks, and it is creepy. The locals shifted uncomfortably in their seats, wishing the train would go faster just to escape her voice. 10. The Eiffel Tower is an iron symbol of romance that requires a bit of effort to visit. A tired American dad looked up at the stairs and decided walking was not an option today. He approached the ticket counter with a very serious question that stunned the staff. He asked if there was a drive-through entrance or a secret elevator for people who do not want to climb or wait. The French ticket agent looked at him with deep existential dread. The dad argued that in America, they would have put an escalator to the top by now. He bought a keychain from a vendor instead and went to wait in the car. 11. A bored teenager named Kyle wanted to leave his mark on history forever. He was visiting the majestic Colosseum in Rome with his family on a summer vacation. Instead of listening to the audio guide, he pulled out a sharp set of car keys. Kyle started carving his initials deep into the 2,000-year-old stone wall while taking a selfie. He thought it would be a cool souvenir for his followers on social media. Security guards immediately swarmed him and dragged him away while his parents shouted. Kyle honestly didn't see the big deal. He told the police that the wall was already old and cracked anyway, so who cares? 12. A thirsty traveler named Susan walked into a cozy traditional British pub in London. She ordered a Diet Coke and expected it to be freezing cold like back home. When the glass arrived, it was room temperature with a single lonely ice cube floating on top. Susan scoffed and sent the drink back, demanding a cup full of ice. The bartender explained that their ice machine was small, and British people don't really do that. Susan rolled her eyes and loudly told her husband this country is living in the Stone Age. She drank her warm soda with a look of pure misery on her face. 13. An older gentleman named Bill was shopping for souvenirs in a vibrant market in Mexico City. He found a colorful sombrero he liked and asked for the price. The vendor smiled and said it was 200 pesos. Bill frowned and pulled out his wallet full of green bills. He loudly asked if they accepted real money instead of that play money. The vendor looked at him with a mix of shock and offense. Bill insisted that American dollars spend everywhere and tried to force the cash into the man's hand. He walked away grumbling that foreign currency was just too confusing to figure out. 14. A young fashionista named Brittany arrived at the Vatican excited to see the Sistine Chapel. She was wearing her favorite denim shorts and rubber flip-flops because it was a hot day. She strutted up to the entrance, ready for her close-up. The Swiss guard took one look at her legs and blocked the path. He explained that there is a strict dress code for holy places. Brittany argued that Jesus wouldn't care about her outfit choices. She stood outside the most famous church in the world complaining on her phone, while her friends went inside without her. She left a bad review online. 15. A patriotic tourist named Brad climbed to the top of Mount Vesuvius in Italy. The view of the crater was majestic and silent. But Brad didn't want silence. He wanted to celebrate his achievement. He pulled a giant American flag out of his backpack and planted it in the volcanic soil. He started chanting USA at the top of his lungs while other hikers stared. A local guide rushed over to tell him to stop being disrespectful to nature. Brad just high-fived the confused guide and said he was conquering the volcano for freedom. He wondered why nobody else was cheering for his amazing feat. 16. A hungry guy named Kevin sat down at a family pizzeria in the heart of Rome. The waiter brought out a beautiful wood-fired margherita pizza with fresh basil. Kevin took one look at the masterpiece and waved the waiter back over. He asked for a side of ranch dressing to dip his crust in. The waiter looked at him like he had just asked to commit a crime. He explained that ranch does not exist in Italy. Kevin looked devastated and whispered to his girlfriend that this was the worst pizza place ever. He ate the pizza dry and sad while dreaming of Hidden Valley sauce. 17. An outdoorsman named Jim was on a bus tour of the Scottish Highlands. The guide was telling stories about local legends and folklore. Jim raised his hand with a very serious look on his face. He asked if the haggis was a real animal and if he could get a license to hunt one. The guide paused and realized Jim was not joking at all. The rest of the bus tried to hold back their laughter. Jim was disappointed when he learned haggis is actually a pudding made of sheep parts. He really wanted to mount a wild haggis head on his wall back in Texas. 18. A woman named Nancy booked a trip to Athens to see the famous Parthenon. She stood in front of the ancient structure with her hands on her hips. She turned to her husband and loudly complained that it looked too old and broken. Nancy asked a nearby guard when they were planning to fix it up and finish the construction. The guard explained that it is a ruin from ancient times. Nancy just shook her head and said they should really hire a better contractor. She left a 1-star review saying the building was in terrible condition and she expected something newer for the price she paid. 19. A generous man named Dave finished a delicious meal in a restaurant in Tokyo. He wanted to show his appreciation for the excellent service. He left a pile of yen on the table that was equal to a 20% tip. Dave walked out feeling like a king. The waitress saw the money and panicked. She grabbed the cash and ran down the street chasing after Dave. She caught up to him, bowing and trying to return the money. Dave thought she was just being modest and tried to run away from her. It turned into a weird chase scene because Dave didn't know tipping is actually rude there. 20. A Disney fan named Emily was walking across Westminster Bridge in London. She looked up at the iconic clock tower that defines the city skyline. She tugged on the sleeve of a passing local businessman. Emily pointed up and asked if that was the big clock from Peter Pan. The man looked at the tower and then back at her with a sigh. He told her it is called Elizabeth Tower, but the bell is Big Ben. Emily just giggled and said she expected to see Tinkerbell flying around it. She took a photo and captioned it second star to the right, ignoring the history completely. 21. A hungry tourist named Gary visited the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam. It is a place of deep reflection and solemn silence. But Gary apparently thought it was a picnic spot. He pulled an entire warm rotisserie chicken out of his backpack in the middle of the tour. The strong smell of roasted garlic and grease filled the small historic hiding place instantly. Other visitors looked at him in absolute horror and disbelief. A security guard rushed over to stop the feast. Gary licked grease off his fingers and complained that he needed his protein for all the walking. He was escorted out still holding a chicken leg. 22. A caffeine-addicted woman named Sarah walked into the holy grandeur of the Vatican City. She was surrounded by centuries of sacred art and spiritual history. But Sarah only cared about one thing. She stopped a bewildered Swiss guard and loudly demanded to know where the Starbucks was located inside the basilica. She explained that she needed her usual caramel macchiato or she would get a headache. The guard simply stared at her in silence, holding his halberd. He politely explained that the Pope does not have a coffee franchise. Sarah rolled her eyes and said it was a wasted business opportunity for the church. 23. An oblivious tourist named Uncle Bob decided to explore a crowded street market in Barcelona. He was wearing a neon green fanny pack that was practically bursting with snacks and maps. He wanted to buy a cheap keychain souvenir. Bob unzipped his bag and pulled out a massive roll of $100 bills. He started counting them slowly in plain sight of everyone. Every pickpocket within a 5-mile radius immediately started following him. A local shopkeeper tried to warn him to be careful. Bob just laughed and patted his belly. 10 minutes later, he was screaming for the police because his money had mysteriously vanished. 24. It was the 4th of July and a patriot named Tom was vacationing in Paris. He stood in front of the Eiffel Tower waiting for the light show to begin. He fully expected the monument to light up in red, white, and blue to honor America. When the tower simply sparkled with gold lights, Tom was furious. He stopped a passing Parisian and asked why they were ignoring the holiday. The local looked at him with total confusion. Tom loudly explained that the whole world should celebrate American independence. The Frenchman just walked away shaking his head while Tom stood there feeling personally disrespected by the French government. 25. A social media influencer named Tiffany visited the ancient ruins of Pompeii. She saw a rope barrier protecting a fragile 2,000-year-old mosaic floor. Tiffany decided the rope was ruining her aesthetic. She stepped right over the barrier and stomped onto the delicate tiles to get the perfect selfie angle. A security guard blew his whistle and sprinted toward her in a panic. Tiffany ignored him and kept posing while blowing kisses to the camera. She was promptly kicked out of the archaeological site. She later posted the photo complaining that the staff was rude and didn't support her creative vision. 26. A chatty woman named Brenda signed up for a silent meditation tour in a temple in Thailand. The #1 rule was absolute silence to respect the monks. But Brenda treated the experience like her own personal reality show. She walked around narrating every single thing she saw. She loudly exclaimed that the statues were cute and this was just like yoga back home. The monks tried to maintain their focus while Brenda critiqued the decor. A guide finally had to whisper for her to please stop talking. Brenda looked shocked and whispered back that she was just expressing her spiritual journey to the group. 27. A picky eater named Jason went on a culinary dream trip to France. But Jason did not trust foreign food or hard, crusty baguettes. He opened his suitcase to reveal 5 loaves of soft white American bread and a giant jar of peanut butter. He sat down at a lovely outdoor bistro and started making a sticky sandwich on the table. The waiter approached with a menu, but Jason waved him away. He loudly announced that French bread was too fancy and he preferred his own supplies. The waiter watched in disgust as Jason ate his squishy sandwich surrounded by the world's best pastries. 28. A clumsy tourist named Steve tripped and twisted his ankle while sightseeing in Toronto. He hobbled into a local clinic expecting quick service. When the receptionist asked for payment details, Steve proudly slapped his American health insurance card on the counter. He asked if he could use it there for emergencies. The receptionist politely explained that Canada is a foreign country with its own system. Steve was genuinely baffled and argued that it should work because they are neighbors. He demanded they call his provider back in Ohio. He spent an hour arguing about co-pays while his ankle continued to swell up like a balloon. 29. A comfort-loving dad named Mike made a reservation at a high-end restaurant in Rome. The venue required elegant attire and was full of people in suits and evening gowns. Mike strolled in wearing his favorite neon basketball shorts and a stained tank top. He looked like he had just finished mowing the lawn. The host looked him up and down with deep disdain. Mike looked around the room and loudly wondered why everyone was staring at him. He told his embarrassed wife that Italians are just jealous of his calf muscles. They were promptly refused a table and sent to a fast food joint. 30. A bargain hunter named Linda entered a luxury department store in Berlin. She found a beautiful designer handbag with a fixed price tag on it. She marched to the counter and offered the cashier half the amount in cash. The German cashier looked at her like she was insane and pointed to the price tag. Linda winked and said she knew how this game worked. She continued to haggle loudly like she was at a flea market. The line behind her groaned in frustration. Linda eventually left empty-handed while shouting that they just lost a sale because they didn't know how to negotiate properly. 31. A sweating tourist named George stood at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. He looked up at the massive limestone blocks and felt his knees buckle. Instead of marveling at the ancient engineering, he turned to his Egyptian guide with a serious question. George asked where the lobby was because he wanted to take the elevator to the top. The guide looked at him with a mixture of confusion and pity. George argued that surely the pharaohs had installed a lift system for convenience. He refused to believe he had to walk and demanded to see the manager of the pyramids immediately. 32. A thirsty teenager named Kyle sat down at a fancy bistro in Paris. He ordered a small glass of cola, which he gulped down in exactly 3 seconds. He waved his empty glass at the waiter and shouted, "Hit me again." The waiter brought another glass and later charged him for both. Kyle looked at the bill and went ballistic. He screamed that refills are a human right and he shouldn't pay for carbonated water. The waiter explained that this isn't a fast food joint in Ohio. Kyle stormed out, vowing to never drink fluids in Europe again until they learned about customer service. 33. An anxious traveler named Brenda arrived at Heathrow Airport security in London. She was determined to be the fastest person in line. Before she even reached the conveyor belt, she started aggressively ripping off her sneakers and socks. A security officer rushed over and told her to please keep her shoes on. Brenda ignored him and insisted that she knew the rules better because she flies out of Chicago. She stood there barefoot on the cold floor holding her smelly running shoes while everyone stared. The officer sighed and explained that different countries actually have different rules. Brenda just grumbled about inconsistencies while hopping on one foot. 34. A man named Sean walked into a historic pub in Dublin wearing a bright green jersey. He ordered a Guinness and immediately started lecturing the locals about heritage. He looked a confused old Irishman in the eye and loudly declared that Boston is actually more authentically Irish than Ireland. The entire pub went silent as the locals processed this statement. Sean explained that St. Patrick's Day is way bigger back home, so they do it better. The bartender just stared at him blankly and slowly topped off his pint. Sean truly believed he was teaching these people about their own culture while they prayed for him to leave. 35. A hungry woman named Barb sat down for breakfast at a luxury hotel in Dubai. She scanned the buffet looking for her favorite crispy morning treat. When she couldn't find pork bacon, she marched up to the chef. Barb slammed her plate down and demanded to know why they were hiding the good meat. The chef politely explained that pork is not served here for religious reasons. Barb looked at him like he was speaking an alien language. She loudly complained that a breakfast without bacon is unconstitutional. She spent the rest of the meal pouting and eating chicken sausage with deep resentment. 36. A clueless guy named Chad decided to visit a somber Holocaust memorial in Berlin. It was a place for quiet reflection and respect for the victims. However, Chad walked in wearing a bright neon t-shirt that said, "I'm with stupid," pointing an arrow to the side. He stood next to his wife while other visitors cried and paid their respects. People looked at his shirt with absolute disgust and horror. Chad didn't notice the stares at all. He was too busy wondering why everyone was so gloomy. He took a few smiling selfies until a guard eventually asked him to please put on a jacket. 37. A social media addict named Chloe hiked deep into the Cambodian jungle to see an ancient temple. The ruins were thousands of years old and breathtakingly beautiful, but Chloe was panic-stricken. She held her phone up to the sky and screamed that there was zero signal. She cornered a monk and asked for the Wi-Fi password because she needed to live stream her spiritual awakening. The monk looked at her peacefully and said nothing. Chloe had a meltdown because if she couldn't post the temple, immediately did the trip even happen. She sat on a 1,000-year-old stone and sulked about the lack of 5G. 38. A family from suburbia went on a dream safari trip in South Africa. The dad saw a herd of wild zebras grazing near the Jeep. He turned to the ranger and asked if he could hop out and pet the striped ponies. The ranger firmly said no, because they are wild animals that bite. The dad laughed and said he is good with horses, so it's fine. Then he asked a follow-up question that stunned the Jeep. He genuinely asked if zebras lay eggs like chickens because they have patterns. The ranger drove away quickly before the lions could sense the lack of intelligence. 39. A loud tourist named Big Tex was visiting a majestic medieval castle in Scotland. He walked through the grand hall with his cowboy hat on. He looked at the ancient stone walls and let out a chuckle. He told the tour guide that this castle was cute, but it was nothing compared to the Alamo back home. The Scottish guide looked at him with deep confusion, considering the castle was 5 times bigger. Tex kept interrupting the history lesson to mention how everything in Texas is superior. The other tourists slowly moved away from him while he measured the walls with his arms. 40. A high-maintenance traveler named Linda was packing for her trip to Italy. She decided that European bedding was simply not up to her standards. She stuffed a massive king-size memory foam pillow into her suitcase, taking up all the space. At the airport, she argued with the check-in agent about the baggage fees. She loudly explained that hotel pillows abroad are always flat and she needs neck support. She dragged the giant pillow around Venice like a security blanket. The hotel maid stared at the massive object on the bed, wondering if she planned to live there permanently. 41. A wholesome dad named Ted took his wife and 3 kids to Amsterdam for a cultural trip. He heard famous things about the red light district and decided they should take a look. As they walked past windows filled with scantily clad women, Ted grew concerned. He walked up to a bouncer outside a club with his children holding ice cream cones. Ted loudly asked if there was a family-friendly section of the district where the kids could play. The bouncer looked at the children and then at Ted with pure disbelief. He explained that this entire area is for adults only. Ted covered his kids' eyes and ran away immediately. 42. A hungry trucker named Big Al sat down at a refined bistro in Paris. He ordered the steak fried, expecting a massive slab of meat hanging off the plate. When the waiter brought a modest 6-ounce filet, Al looked personally insulted. He poked the meat with his fork and asked if this was the appetizer or the kids' meal. He loudly demanded an American-sized portion because he was a growing boy. The waiter sneered and explained that quality is more important than quantity here. Al ended up ordering 3 more steaks and complained that Europeans must be starving to death. 43. A proud Texan named Hank wanted everyone in Rome to know exactly where he came from. While everyone else wore light linen shirts and comfortable walking shoes, Hank went full cowboy. He strutted through the Vatican wearing a 10-gallon hat leather boots with spurs and a massive belt buckle. The clicking of his boots echoed through the silent museums like a Western movie standoff. Locals stared at him, wondering if he was a lost actor. Hank told his wife he was just representing the Lone Star State. He didn't realize he looked like a costume character at a theme park. 44. A concerned tourist named Karen arrived in Pisa and looked up at the famous White Tower. She gasped in genuine horror, seeing the iconic tilt. Instead of taking a fun photo, she rushed over to a security guard in a panic. She frantically asked if the tower was supposed to do that, or if it was currently broken and falling. The guard looked at her with a straight face and said, "It has been leaning for 800 years. Karen didn't believe him. She yelled at other tourists to move back for safety. She left a review saying the maintenance crew was lazy. 45. A tech-savvy guy named Jason was exploring a rustic street market in rural Greece. He was dying of thirst and grabbed a small bottle of water from an old grandmother's stall. The price was 50 cents. Jason whipped out his platinum credit card and tried to tap it on a basket of lemons. The old woman looked at the plastic card like it was a space rock. She shook her head and said cash only. Jason argued that he doesn't carry paper money because it is archaic. He held up the line for 10 minutes trying to Venmo an 80-year-old woman. 46. A sports fan named Mike bought tickets to a Premier League soccer match in Manchester. The stadium was packed with singing fans chanting local songs. Mike felt left out, so he decided to bring some American spirit. During a quiet moment, he stood up and started belting out the Star-Spangled Banner at the top of his lungs. 60,000 British fans turned to look at him in total confusion. A guy next to him asked if he was okay. Mike finished the song with his hand on his heart. He sat down thinking he had just improved international relations with his vocal performance. 47. A worried mom named Susan was preparing for a 2-week culinary tour of Italy. Despite Italy having the best food on earth, Susan was terrified of starving. She packed one entire suitcase filled with Cheese Whiz crackers and instant noodles just in case. When she opened her bag at customs, a mountain of processed snacks spilled out onto the floor. The Italian customs officer picked up a box of Pop-Tarts and looked at her with deep sadness. Susan explained she needs her comfort food. She spent the trip eating dry cereal in her hotel room while her family ate fresh pasta. 48. A history buff named Dave visited Berlin, excited to see the famous Berlin Wall. He walked up to a random brick wall behind a grocery store that was built last year. Dave flagged down a busy local and pointed excitedly at the bricks. He asked if this was where the wall used to be and if he could get a tour of the grim history. The local looked at the supermarket wall and then at Dave. He explained that is just a delivery loading dock. Dave was disappointed but took a photo anyway. He told his friends he felt the Cold War energy there. 49. A food critic wannabe named Sharon sat in a 500-year-old trattoria in Florence. An elderly grandmother was hand-rolling pasta in the back just like her ancestors. When Sharon received her dish, she took one bite and made a face. She snapped her fingers and demanded to speak to the manager immediately. The owner came out wiping flour from his hands. Sharon loudly complained that the pasta was too chewy and not cooked enough for her taste. The owner simply smiled and took the plate away. He kicked her out for insulting his Nona's cooking while the whole restaurant cheered. And there you have it, 49 undeniable reasons why the rest of the world sometimes pretends not to speak English when they see us coming. If you laughed, cried, or unfortunately recognized your own Uncle Bob in this video, do us a huge favor and smash that like button right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell to join the BrainFumble family so you never miss a chance to get smarter. Now I have a serious question for you. Which one of these tourists deserves the gold medal for absolute stupidity? Was it the guy who tried to fight a kangaroo? Or the woman demanding a drive-through at the Eiffel Tower? Let me know your pick in the comments below. And do not click off yet. If you thought this was wild, you have to see the video popping up on your screen right now. It is even crazier than this one. Click it now and I will see you there. Thanks for watching.